December 1943, high over northern Germany, a crippled American B-17 bomber was drifting through the freezing sky, alone and dying. 10 men were on board, many wounded, some unconscious, the aircraft losing altitude with every mile. They had been torn apart by flak and shredded by fighters, and the bomber should not have stayed airborne. But it did, and because it did, an encounter took place that would change 2 lives forever. The American pilot was 21-year-old Charlie Brown, flying his first mission. The German pilot was 28-year-old Franz Stiegler, a veteran ace with more than 24 victories. The world expected them to kill each other. Instead, one man made a choice that defied every rule of war, and that choice would echo for the next 47 years. Charlie Brown limped his bomber back to England on December 20th, 1943. Ye Olde Pub landed at RAF Seething with 11 wounded men aboard, including 1 killed in action. Ground crews stared in disbelief, holes ripped through the fuselage, a stabilizer nearly gone, the nose shattered, the tail barely attached. Even experienced mechanics could not understand how the bomber had survived. During debriefing, Charlie reported everything that had happened: the initial attack, the damage, and then the impossible moment when a German fighter formed up alongside them, refused to fire, and escorted them out of German airspace. His commanding officers listened in silence. Then the order came: never speak of this again. Not to the crew, not to other pilots, not in writing, not in public. The idea of a German fighter showing mercy, especially during the height of the air war, was unacceptable. If word spread, they feared American crews might hesitate, expecting chivalry that did not exist. So the incident was buried. Charlie finished his tour, flew more missions, and eventually came home to West Virginia. He earned a degree, rejoined the Air Force in 1949, and served until 1965. Later, he became a U.S. Foreign Service officer, deployed to Laos and Vietnam. He married, raised a family, and built a new life. But he never forgot the German pilot who spared him. Some nights, long after the war had ended, Charlie woke up drenched in sweat. His daughter remembered hearing him cry out in his sleep. The flak, the wounded crew, the wind screaming through the holes in the aircraft, and always the face of the German pilot who had looked back at him. On the other side of the war, Franz Stiegler stayed silent too. After escorting the American bomber to the North Sea, he landed near Bremen and said nothing. What he had done was a court-martial offense in Nazi Germany. Sparing an enemy aircraft was considered treason. The punishment was execution. Stiegler knew it. Every pilot in the Luftwaffe knew it, especially after 1942, when Hitler demanded fanatical resistance. If anyone reported his mercy, he could have been shot on the spot. So Franz carried the secret into the final years of the war. He survived the breakdown of Germany, the chaos of surrender, and the hardship that followed. In 1953, he immigrated to Canada, married, and became a successful businessman in Vancouver. But like Charlie, he never forgot that bomber. Never forgot the terrified young men inside, clinging to life. Never forgot the American pilot who stared back at him through the shattered plexiglass. Stiegler later said that after that mission, he lost his appetite for war trophies. The victory claims, the competition, the pressure to earn kills, it all felt hollow. Seeing the destroyed B-17 had changed something in him. For decades, the two men lived separate lives on two different continents, tied together only by a single memory neither could let go. In 1986, more than 40 years later, Charlie Brown attended a pilot reunion in Boston called the Gathering of Eagles. During the event, someone asked him whether he had any memorable missions from World War II. He hesitated. Then, for the first time since 1943, he told the story publicly. When he finished, the room fell silent. Veterans approached him afterward with the same question. Did you ever try to find the German pilot? Charlie realized he hadn't. For 43 years, he had carried the memory, but had never attempted to answer the most obvious question. Who was he? He began searching. First the US Air Force, then German archives, then historians, then Luftwaffe associations. Months became years. Records were incomplete, lost, or destroyed by retreating German forces. East German and West German files were still scattered across two political systems. The Luftwaffe's roster from 1943 around Bremen was badly fragmented. Charlie received nothing but dead ends. But he couldn't stop. The nightmares persisted. The memory persisted. In 1989, he tried something new. He wrote a detailed letter describing the encounter: date, location, aircraft markings, altitude, everything he remembered, and sent it to a newsletter for American and German combat pilots. He added one detail he had never forgotten. After escorting the B-17 to safety, the German pilot looked directly at him and gave a salute. Charlie mailed the letter and waited. He was now 67 years old. Nearly half a century had passed. The German pilot might be dead, might have been killed in 1944 or 1945, might have died in the decades since. But Charlie needed to know. Meanwhile, in Vancouver, 74-year-old Franz Stigler was reading the same newsletter. He too had attended Boeing's 50th anniversary celebration in 1986, the only German pilot present. He had even mentioned the incident in a local TV interview, though he never expected to learn the bomber crew's fate. Over the years, he quietly asked around at veteran gatherings, trying to find answers, but found none. Then he saw Charlie's letter. Every detail matched: the date, the location, the shattered condition of the bomber, the escort toward the North Sea, even the salute. After 47 years, Stigler finally knew the truth. The American crew survived. He sat down at his desk and wrote a letter to Miami, Florida. It was brief, direct, and exactly 4 words. I was the one. On January 18, 1990, Charlie Brown opened an envelope from Canada and stared at the sentence. His hands shook. After nearly 5 decades, the ghost he had carried was suddenly real. When they first spoke on the phone, Franz described his fighter, the Bf-109G, its markings, its unit, the engine sound. The moment he pulled alongside the bomber and saw the wounded crew trying to keep each other alive, he told Charlie about his commanding officer, Gustav Rödel, who had once said, "If I ever see or hear of you shooting at a man in a parachute, I'll shoot you myself." To Franz, the men in that bomber were no different from men hanging helpless in parachutes. Shooting them would have been murder, not combat. He tried to signal them to land in Germany, or at least divert to neutral Sweden, where the wounded could receive treatment. But the Americans kept flying west, toward England. So Franz made a decision that could have gotten him executed. He flew alongside them through German anti-aircraft batteries, risking being shot down by his own side. Only when they reached the coast did he break away and salute. As the two men talked on the phone, something shifted. Charlie's nightmares, which had haunted him for decades, began to fade. For the first time since 1943, he felt peace. The face that had tormented him now had a name, a voice, a human being attached to it. And for Franz, hearing Charlie's voice meant the world. He had spent 47 years wondering whether the bomber crashed into the sea, whether the crew died before reaching England. Now he knew the truth. They all lived. 6 months later, they met in Seattle. Cameras captured the moment. Franz stepped out of the car, saw Charlie, and immediately ran forward and embraced him. The two former enemies held each other tightly and wept. "I love you, Charlie," Franz whispered. Charlie introduced him to the surviving crew, men who were alive because Franz had refused to pull the trigger. That day, Franz met their families, their children, their grandchildren. Entire lifetimes that existed because of one decision in the skies over Germany. The two men became inseparable. They called each other weekly, traveled together, spoke at events, air shows, museums, schools, anywhere people wanted to hear the story. In one visit, Franz handed Charlie a book and wrote inside, "In 1940, I lost my only brother as a night fighter. Thanks, Charlie. Your brother, Franz." Their families grew close. Their wives became friends. Their bond became unbreakable. Not everyone understood. Some Canadians accused Franz of being a Nazi. Some Germans called him a traitor for sparing Americans. Franz didn't care. They would never understand, he said. What mattered was what happened that day. Their friendship lasted 18 years. On March 22, 2008, Franz Stigler died at 92. 8 months later, on November 24, 2008, Charlie Brown passed away at 86. They are buried thousands of miles apart, but their story remains one of the most extraordinary acts of mercy in the history of warfare. Two men met for 10 minutes in combat, spent 47 years trying to find each other, and became brothers for the final chapter of their lives. Their story was later documented in the book A Higher Call, bringing their extraordinary act of humanity to millions. But the true legacy is simpler. Franz Stigler proved that even in the middle of the most brutal war in human history, a man can choose compassion. A man can see an enemy not as a target, but as a human being. And sometimes that choice can change everything.